Yeah, welcome to another episode of The Solar Journey. Our guest today is Karolina Attspodina. Welcome, Karolina.
I think let's start one more time. Let's do one more time.
Sure, no worries, no worries. Yeah. Welcome to another episode of The Solar Journey. Our guest today is Karolina Attspodina. Welcome, Karolina.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Super excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming onto the show, Karolina. Let me briefly introduce Karolina. She's a co-founder and the CEO of WeDoSolar. She founded WeDoSolar in 2021, and the company is based in Berlin, Germany, and it provides smart solar consumer electronics. The most prominent product line is a balcony solar system. These systems are now quite popular in Germany and other countries these days. I've got one myself, actually. It's fair to call Karolina a serial entrepreneur because WeDoSolar is already her third company she founded. She's got a degree in economics and her first roles were in sales and business development. So she's all about the commercial side of businesses. So Karolina, compared to some of our guests on the solar journey, you're a relatively new entrant to the solar industry. What attracted you to go into solar? What was the solar spark moment?
Yeah, I think this question is asked quite a lot, and usually I definitely had my spark moment, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. But usually I tell people that I'm just crazy enough to try something new. Because obviously I'm not an engineer, and this is something that I think people wouldn't usually consider, right? If they're not, let's say, experts in the domain. But for me, it was quite an interesting challenge, I would say. So I think like the spark moment for me was in Portugal. It was COVID times, and while walking through the streets of Lisbon, they have a lot of different kind of Christmas lights during Christmas. And one of my friends was saying, do you know that actually these Christmas lights are all solar based? So the government doesn't use any energy and really tries to reduce, their energy usage during this time. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing. Why isn't every single country out there in the world do the same thing? Because it makes so much sense. And then at some point, after like a few months, I actually got two solar clients. One had like a solar based AC that they were installing in real estate buildings, and one actually had solar blinds. So I found it fascinating, that you can put solar in your blinds and then install that in the home. And for me, it made sense that there should be other products as well out there that help us, not only reduce our CO2, which was kind of like, the topic of what I was thinking of from the very start, but also how can we actually make our energy bills much smaller? Why can't we use solar in the cities? Why can't we use solar for renters? And so on, right? So this was kind of like the question, and the spark moment actually happened through a Christmas light, which was solar based.
Excellent, excellent. Cool. Yeah, before joining PV, you worked in marketing, strategy, and sales, and also, as I understand, in a consultancy role. How do you compare the customer relationship in solar to these other industry you worked before?
Well, I think it's all relatable. And to be honest, right now, what we do here with solar and how we, let's say, adopt the product is also purely based on the marketing and the sales, let's say, skills that I have from before. So my specialty was all about, taking kind of like difficult tech products and seeing how to simplify them, not just to in order to sell to the market, but also how to tell the story a bit better, right? Because solar is such a complicated topic, and I think people really think about, big solar kind of farms out there, potentially solar on the rooftops, and not everybody's fortunate enough, to be able to install such an installation. And for me, it was, how can we take a topic that is so technical and maybe even scary at times, and make it extremely simple, right? So over the kind of like journey of my career, I've been making products simple. Yeah, so that's what kind of helps me. And I think in terms of customers, they want simplicity, they want something easy. And of course, not all of us, are tech savvy and understand how exactly electricity works and what we should do, right?
Yeah, yeah. We'll come to your actual products a little bit later. How you, I guess, also try to simplify solar balcony systems. Before, I'd like to stay a bit more on your choices you did in the past. You were always in sales and business development. And in a bit, you already outlined maybe why you are attracted to these roles, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little. So, what do you like about sales, the marketing, the business development in general? Yeah,
Well, in general, no company is going to be existing without those two.
that's for sure.
uh,
Yeah,
and,
only the very
and
lucky ones. Yeah,
Yes, yes, yes. Very just few, right? But in general, everything is built on the sales and the marketing of the company. And of course, the marketing really depends. It could be organic marketing, it could be PR, it could be, there are so many different kinds. But sales and marketing, I see it as one. So usually, I think corporations or organizations kind of separate those teams, and then sales and marketing are two different teams. I don't really believe in that. I think those two teams really need to collaborate and be as one, because the more, let's say, touch points they have, the more successful the company will actually become.
yeah,
Right. So for me, this is one of the major crucial parts. You can definitely have a good product, but if you don't have the understanding of how to sell this product, nobody will potentially see it.
yeah,
Yeah. So this is a crucial part for any business, just like for ours. And I guess from my side, of course, as I said, I'm not an engineer. I have a fantastic co-founder who is an engineer, and he makes the crazy ideas happen, while I'm able to portray the vision of what we're selling and what is our future potentially then with solar.
yeah. So you like the let's say storytelling and the translation from a technical features, technical
Yes.
products into a story the customers like. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, we have to understand that people are buying from people, right? I back companies that I love and that inspire me. And that's the same thing for us. I think it goes for any startup. So I think, like, when you're building your journey in a startup or maybe personal brand, or it doesn't matter, right? It's all about like the story. What are people going to relate to? And people buy from people, right? They don't buy from companies, really.
yeah. Definitely, definitely. Yeah. In let's jump to PV. In PV, the traditional sales channel was from manufacturers of modules or the other hardware to distributors, then to installers. And the installers were the actual interface with customers. Now you work directly with consumers. You try to make the consumers kind of the installers. What do you see as the biggest challenges in selling solar to apartment owners or residents?
Well, I think one of the biggest, I think, challenges, I mean, in general, B2C is really hard, right? Like, that's a really hard business, and only very few, I would say, get lucky or, how to crack the code and have, an instant growth in the B2C market. And it's definitely not easy for us. In terms of, working with consumers directly, one of the challenges is that people don't necessarily believe that the system will work on such a small scale, or that it will help them on such a small scale. Even though the story is very easy, they might not understand if they really need it, right? So I think like the whole educational aspect, and it takes, a couple of years to educate the market until, I would say like the majority starts to buy and believe in a certain technology. So since we were one of the first ones, to be on the market with such a product, we are going through that stages of education, right? And this is a lot of time, but also a lot of money to educate the market to be able to trust the product that is actually out there, right? Because even like we'll probably get into like investments and things like that in a second, but even for VCs or for any type of investors, a new product like this, especially in hardware, is really really hard to kind of think into the future, right? You have your own little vision as a founder, but then can investors see that vision, and can they see that product working out and potentially bringing profit?
Yeah.
So it's a tricky question, right? But education is basically the hardest part of it all.
Okay, excellent, thanks. Yeah, we'll come to the value proposition and the way you finance your startup a little later. Before I'll jump to the fact that you're kind of a serial entrepreneur, right? I think three times makes a series. What are the 3 top learnings for you as a founder? What do you take from the previous companies now to WeDoSolar? Yeah.
So this might sound cliche because I think so many entrepreneurs say this, but you need to be fast. I think that's one of the main things. Whether it's failing fast or iterating fast or pivoting fast, I think fast is like one of the major learnings and major things that like you have to do if you want to be the first, right? Nobody wants to be the second, so I strive to be the first. And number 2 is definitely team. Like, who are you building it with, right? Your team members at the very start matter. The culture that you're building matters. So I think all these aspects, really matter in the long run for the future, right? As you're building the company along. And the third one, I would say, just to be crazy enough to try new things and not be afraid, to be honest, because I think so many people are afraid. And what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't work out potentially. But I think if you're not afraid, you have that confidence that people want to be part of, and potentially, you get new partners on board, and you get more sales and so on. I think the energy of the person and the whole team and how you portray yourself is a huge thing in business.
Yeah. You already mentioned 2 characteristics of a good founder, which is he has to be crazy and brave.
Brave, yeah.
I believe, hope that there are people listening to this podcast who consider to start a company. So what should they bring to the table if they want to be successful, except for being crazy and brave? What would you add? And fast.
Well,
Yeah.
I think this is my version, right? Of like
Sure,
me
sure.
being crazy, not being afraid to try something new. And I think like when I was starting out, I was rather inspired by the fact that there is only so many women in the world that started solar companies, right? And it was like literally like a handful that I could count on like my both hands. And it was crazy to me that it's so little, right? So like I definitely wanted to make an impact in that, let's say, sector as a woman entrepreneur, and make sure that others get inspired as well by seeing, okay, I can actually start a tech company and it's not scary, right? And it definitely can work out. So one of the things for me is to inspire others, and I give also lectures in universities where I'm super excited to see a class where there is a lot of women, and I just want to inspire that, generation of newcomers that will hopefully have their own business. I think education in terms of like schools have been lacking so much that our curriculums are so outdated. We're not really taught properly about business and finances and how we can actually create a company, but rather how can we work for someone, right? So I think this is where I would love, for our society to change a little bit, and definitely, inspire the new generations to not think that they cannot do something or they cannot achieve something. And that's like one of the biggest drivers, I think, for me. And yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah. I totally agree on the educational part. I think one of the issues is that we train the kids to solve problems, right? 2 + 2 is 4, right? But in business, you don't have these simple questions, right? You have more polarities. It could be this, but it could be that, right? Because it's about the future and you can't really predict. So you need to train people to accept that you don't have to solve problems, but polarities where you sometimes don't know, right? You have to trust your gut feel or your experience, right? And I think this is where we don't do such a good job as a society, right? We train them to solve problems, but not polarities,
Exactly, yeah.
right? Abstract. You can't predict, right? And after all, you need a lot of luck, right? That's when the craziness and the brave part comes in, right? Yeah, I totally agree. Very cool.
But I think also the mindset, right? I mean, I was growing up, at least during my let's say first years in Ukraine, right? Like I was born in Ukraine, and it's like the post-Soviet Union country that the mindset is very closed in the sense of encouraging your kids to not be afraid to do something, right? Like I was never encouraged to do something bigger, or I was never um, taught that I could do anything in this world, right? I was rather probably put down that this is not possible. It's not for you. It's not for the girls, So these were my realities. And I definitely don't want to live the way my childhood or like my teenage years actually were.
Yeah.
And I believe that if we teach our kids from the very early on, right, that there are no glass ceilings and like anything is possible and they shouldn't be afraid, they will have massive confidence in themselves, but also in what they can build, right? So I think that definitely potentially delayed my entrepreneurial journey, but I'm here now, so all good.
Excellent. It's a wonderful topic. Actually, it's one of my favorite topics, really. So that's why I would like to add one more question. So how did you break out of your jail? How did you become
Actually,
aware of it? And when you said, "Hey, no, I'm not in a jail. I can do whatever I want."
yeah, I think people that surround you is super important. And when I came to Germany 13 years ago, I was surrounded by entrepreneurs. It was the time when people were raising huge amounts of money, just getting out of university and just doing such weird companies that like I couldn't even believe that they raised this much amount of money. But it was possible, and it was possible, and I could see this possibility. And a lot of them definitely encouraged me that, hey, why don't you do your own thing? Like you're so good at XYZ, why don't you do your own thing? And they kept on repeating this and repeating this. And then I was helping others to do XYZ in their business, and at some point I said, okay, maybe it is time for me to try and to see how this actually works out. So definitely your surrounding and who you are with hugely influences on your decisions and how you're going to build your potential startup. Right. And then it comes to okay, first you have the encouragement maybe from your surroundings, and then you're getting into the maybe more philosophical part of like how can I read more about entrepreneurship and mindset and how this affects and so on, right? So and then you're starting to grow completely different sides of you that you haven't even considered before.
Excellent. Any good resources, podcasts, books that you recommend entrepreneurs or to be entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so one of my favorites is definitely Diary of the CEO, but probably a lot of entrepreneurs watch that one. That's with Stephen Bartlett. And another one I really love, it's a podcast of Guy Raz, which is called How I Built This. And these are basically the renowned entrepreneurs. They're telling, stories, how their companies actually came about. And I don't know, for some, they were selling fax machines, and then all of a sudden they're doing something completely different, right? So it's just kind of like about not giving up and the survival mode, which I think every single entrepreneur goes through. We just spoke about mindset. Like one of my favorite books is by Carol Dweck, which is called Mindset, about closed versus open mindset and how we can actually shift our mindset in order to fulfill our full potential, right? And I think every single one of us has it within them. We just need to work on it. It's kind of like going to the gym every day, right? And seeing whether you develop some muscles. So I think it's the same thing.
Wonderful. We'll put these resources into the show notes. Thanks a lot for your advice here for me and also others, I hope. Now let's switch to WeDoSolar. So you're selling a balcony solar system. For some time, these systems were in a bit of a legal gray area here in Germany, and I guess that holds also for other countries. So what's the latest in terms of the legality of these systems in Germany and maybe also in your other markets where you sell to?
Yeah, I think like when we started, definitely it was like such a gray area, and we were also thinking, oh my God, is this gonna really work out? And will we be able to actually push the legislation and do the lobbying, to make sure that these systems are actually allowed? And I'm very happy that our lobbying did work, and things are much easier right now. So I think the first allowance was like 600 watt of installation in Germany, and then now from this year, from the start of this year, it's switched to 800 watt. So basically, the capacity of wattage that you can install is increasing, which is fantastic. From another side, also we see that you can use like a normal power plug. So now this is not prohibited. Where I think in 2021 when we started, it was still kind of like a gray zone. So people did it, but it wasn't exactly legal, right? So we're just saying, yeah, as long as it's like safe and you think it's safe, but obviously it was like not the best, not the best way kind of like to proceed. But we did know on our side that like it is safe, and our devices are safe and nothing will actually like happen in the household. So that's why we were confident enough, to sell them. And of course, when we talk, about European legislation, the allowance is like 800 watt, but still it's quite broken down. So there's a lot of silos in terms of like different countries having different legislation rules. For example, Italy has only allowance of like 350 watt, right? So most of the players right now that sell balcony solar don't go into Italy because it's quite a small amount to install, which doesn't give such a big significance of reduction. And I was actually in Brussels with the European Commission recently, like a few months ago, where we spoke about how can we actually make the legislation, across the board that it's really stays at 800 watts. So I think European Commission is really working on that right now to make sure that the legislation is rolled out across the board and there are no, differences in different countries, because it's extremely difficult with certification for other countries. With the devices, you require different certification, different amount of output. So yeah, not an easy task, but we're tackling it like kind of like one country at a time. And of course, Germany had a lot of subsidies, right? So subsidies for the past 2 years have been massive, and a lot of our customers have gotten these subsidies and basically bought their solar sets free of charge.
All right. That sounds good. I was too late for that. But it's so cheap now. By now, it doesn't really matter anymore. In terms of legislation, Germany is where? At the top or somewhere in the middle?
The top. Yeah, Germany is definitely at the top. Like Germany is #1 country in terms of solar installation and adoption within Europe.
For balcony systems, yeah.
Not just for balcony systems, also for rooftop.
Okay, but
yeah,
when you only look at balcony, your market segment, then would you say that the legislation is now super clear and transparent in Germany, so that you have the largest market here in Germany? Or
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if we talk about the installation of solar balconies in Germany, the latest numbers this year do say that it's around 500,000 installations within the German market that have been registered. However, by talking to different partners and sources, it's kind of not the number that is registered, but we know that it's probably around 2 million installations, right? So a lot of the people simply don't register their devices and they just use it, right? Because actually the government doesn't really have the possibility to track whether someone has a solar system installed or not. Yeah. Right? So it's kind of like up to you as the German citizen to be transparent and register such device simply for the calculations of the grid management and and how much maybe pressure there is within the grid. But I'm pretty sure that it's around 2 million devices, which probably would make up, let's say, 800 megawatt worth of power.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a lot. So you need to register, or is it just an option to register your balcony system?
You do need to register. So before it was quite bureaucratical. Yeah. From this year on, you don't need to register it anymore with your electricity provider, but just with the network agency, which is super fast. We also offer the service within our app. So you just kind of put a tick box and that's done, right? So there is no kind of hurdles there. But of course, there are providers that don't kind of tell maybe their users or their customers that they need to register or what they need to do. So I believe that this, mismatch of numbers basically comes from that, and also from people kind of I guess, not caring, right?
Yeah, excellent. So 2 million systems and average wattage of 500 watts, let's assume, then that's quite a number.
600, I would say.
Sorry, 600. Oh, okay, 600. Yeah, but just to get a rough estimate, that's quite a lot of extra PV per year, right?
Yes,
excellent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
But maybe let's stay in that area for some. I guess some of the criticism for balcony solar is that the systems can only be relatively limited in size, right? So what kind of impact do you think balcony solar can have in terms of the wider energy transition?
Well, huge. I mean, if you think about if everyone installs balcony solar on their balcony, it has a huge impact, right? Of course, you're making your bills slightly lower, but also you are reducing the fossil fuel usage out of the grid. And that's massive. I think the next stage is definitely usage of the batteries, right? So I think the first wave was kind of okay, can we install solar on balconies? And then can we install then batteries, right, to optimize this usage of solar? And there's plenty of terraces and balconies that are very long and large, and we have customers that install 2 and 3 devices or like sets on their balconies, right? So for them it makes so much sense to have a battery to store that energy, and to use it at night. Of course, when the capacity is as low as like 600 or 800 watt, usually you would use it just for like all your standby devices that you have plugged in. Yeah, so this is quite easy. There's probably not so much overproduction, and if there is, it's very, very minimal. So there is no such pressure, I would say, on the grid, right? Because actually it's used right away where it's generated, and it doesn't need to travel, right? So I think like the way our grids are, and the fact that they're like extremely old, the reason why big solar farms cannot bring, let's say, the green energy into the city, or at least not into all parts of the cities, is because of this travel, right, that needs to happen from one point to another. And if we're generating energy on our balcony, we're using it right away, right? So actually this pressure doesn't happen. But we also have, so I think like balconies is one thing, and we started with balconies, definitely a prominent product, but we're moving towards other devices, and we see that there's such a big need for batteries. There's need for inverters. We have our own inverter as well. And my thinking of, future is definitely, as you mentioned in your intro, smart household devices of solar. So we're thinking about, okay, when there are enough devices out there, how do we manage the grid, right? How do we do grid balancing? How can we help electricity providers to have access to this data, to do the grid balancing, to make sure there are no, pressures in some points, right? So this is all what we're thinking about as well.
Yeah. We'll come to that in a second, your differentiation and your other markets. One question back to the technicality. So it's an 800 watt limit that holds for the inverter, so not for the modules, right? So you can have a lot more modules, but all right.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
I think that's very important, right? To understand, right?
Yes, exactly. So from this year, the legislation changed that the output of the inverter that you can put into the house grid is 800 watt, but you can actually have up to 2,000 watt worth of solar power.
2,000? Okay.
Yeah, 2,000 watt. Yeah. So this is like, if you think about it, this is 4 normal glass solar panels, right? If we're talking about like glass, which usually have like 440 to 500 watt each. And this is what you can have. And this is fantastic. But in that setup, it would make sense to have a battery, right?
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be able to use all this power, right away in your household.
Yeah.
And most likely you're not there during the day, right? So that's where the battery comes in place, and obviously, stores the power from the 2,000 watt installation. And it also plays not just on balconies, but I think also on single family households, right?
Yeah.
We have a market that is starting at 10,000 watt installations for like large rooftop installations, obviously super huge grid fees that everybody needs to pay in order to actually connect to the grid and be able to sell electricity to the grid. But in that sense, if you have a 2 kilowatt peak installation with a battery, you actually don't need that registration and you don't need to pay the grid fees, right? So that's the whole point, and I think a very new market for us as well.
Yeah, excellent. So who's going to do all that work? So tell us a little bit about WeDoSolar. So it's almost 4 years old. How many employees do you have? What are your most important markets? I guess it's Germany. Yeah. What's your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal? What's your mission, right? You already mentioned batteries, so you're thinking about other application, but what else could there be? And where do you want to take it, right? So what's your, let's say, revenue target for in 5 to 10 years from now?
Oh, it's difficult to talk about revenue. Obviously, we have
in the future.
obviously we have our projections and
Yeah.
the market size and what is possible. But I think first, we were calculating in terms of like how big is the solar balcony market,
Mm.
right? And at the start, it was kind of difficult to calculate because we didn't know how many people are actually going to install it, right? How many people are going to be interested in this. So we're kind of like, "Ugh, I don't know, let's see." But overall, like if we're talking about Germany has around 16 million households, right, that basically can install balcony solar. And if we're talking about like 2 million being installed, right, we're like at 10% of that only. So there's still a lot of work to be done, right? And there's definitely opportunities just now with, I think, with the new legislation, that we can move potentially into a single family households, right? Just with the smaller installations. So our market has become bigger. And right now we're actually preparing for our next funding round, our round A. And this is where we will be then calculating and portraying, how big our market really is and what are kind of revenues we're expecting,
Yeah.
right? So I think what we calculated in 2021 or 2022 has nothing to do with what is going to be now, right?
Sure.
So the market is changing rapidly. And we definitely see that it's not just balcony solar. That's like just one component of a solar system, or like a small, let's say, segment that we can cover. But there is other segments that will come down the line, right? So I think next thing, we came out with an inverter. So we saw that there is huge problems with inverters, simply because yes, they are created or like manufactured in China, and there are some really great inverter companies on the market, but they're not really consumer oriented, right? So they're made for installers, for kind of like electricians, and not to be handled by the end consumer. So we kind of saw a niche there that we can definitely take, and came out with our own inverter, which is 5G connected. So you don't have to connect it to your Wi-Fi. You don't have to be reliant on Wi-Fi. You will always have data. It actually, kind of closes some other business cases that I can't talk about just yet, but they will be out very soon. And for us, we basically see, okay, how can we perfect what is out there and make it better, right? And it's the same thing goes for the battery, right? How can we make the battery more interesting, more smart, better in terms of like looking into the future, and in looking into these virtual small power plants that we're going to have across the board, in the cities and rural areas and so on, and how can we use them to have a bigger impact in general. Yeah.
So you address the aspect of your, let's say, OEM manufactured inverter and battery system. Others do that as well, right? So there's quite some other players out there in your segment. What exactly do you think your differentiation, right? So I saw that you have very lightweight modules. That's an interesting part. You changed the size. You have certain ways of installing it, which is, I think, new and provocative, I guess, for a solar veteran, right? So you use Velcro tapes, and you already mentioned the 5G monitoring. Is that the USP how you would describe it, or what else would you add to your differentiation?
No, I think our USP lays a lot in the software. Yes, there is the
Okay.
hardware part, which I think still looks better than anything out there so far. But also in terms of like functionality and and the easiness of installation. But there's definitely the software part, right? How do these devices also interact with the software? What they can do? Whether the battery will be able to work with dynamic pricing. So there's a lot of these kind of discussions and like what we're going to come out with that in general fall on the software part, right? So
Okay.
I think software is a big part, and the fact that we're still a German company, right? Like all of our data is stored in Germany. I think for a lot of the German users, but also maybe companies, because we also have sometimes companies, purchasing such sets for their employees, for example. Yeah. It's really important for them that their data is safe and that their data is actually based in Germany.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's one of the things. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't use glass for your module, right? The standard solar module design is using glass for decades now. That makes them fairly heavy, right? And particularly for the private household owner, that's quite a thing to carry it up the stairs. So you've chosen, let's say, plastic covers, and I mentioned already the Velcro tapes to install it. How would you argue that this is a design which allows long-term reliability and safety? Yeah.
Yeah, so we have gone through a lot of testing, right, before bringing this out. So we also have like a static report in terms of like our Velcro tapes, how much weight do they actually hold. So it's a very interesting fabric called Demine. And basically, it's used mainly in the military or for like sportswear, which is heavily like rain resistant or UV light resistant. So this is why our Velcro straps are also. We know that they're going to hold for a very long time, right? So it is a bit more expensive for us to produce them, but we know that they're going to be there for literally years and years and years to come, right? If we compare it to any like aluminum or like steel type of connections, you would have to then probably detach them and attach new ones every couple of years. So far, we saw that probably 2 years. Within 2 years, you would need to actually exchange the metal straps. And for us, like it was all like about, okay, how can we build a quality product that is going to last very long and is going to be also safe, right? That's the reason why we never went for glass panels, simply because I don't imagine myself, for example, putting up a glass panel which weighs 20 to 30 kilos up on the balcony, like outside of my balcony fence. That is just not possible. And obviously, like, yes, you can do it, and people do it with, I don't know, their friends and family and so on, but it's not safe. It is not safe. I think the constructions that hold these solar panels are also haven't been tested over time. So I don't know when these like little solar farms are going to fall off, right? It just kind of takes one to have this domino effect. So that's why we never went for glass panels. I believe glass panels can definitely be used, on like a flat roof or in the garden. This makes sense. You don't need flexible panels then. But I think on the balcony, and especially if we're going into, height measures, like and going, I don't know, 30, 40 meters up, it's definitely not glass. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Very cool choice. You already mentioned you're going for a Series A financing round very soon. So you did raise funding from VCs in I don't know when you started, I guess, or 21 or 2022. Was it any difficult? You already mentioned hardware company. I founded myself a hardware company, and it's basically it's not an app, so it was super difficult to find investors. Eventually succeeded, but and that was 10 years ago. I think maybe it was even worse back then, but I don't know what's the VC situation is like. So was it any difficult? How did you do it? And maybe the other way around, what would you recommend? Hardware, software, you kind of in a mix. Today everything has a large software portion. So you can't be a sole hardware VC company anymore, I would say. So what would you recommend startups looking for funding, how to be quickly successful with getting money?
There is no perfect pill to swallow to do that, unfortunately. It is very, very hard. And we had a lot of rejections. Even though we have the software part, we're still seen as purely hardware manufacturer that has a lot of risk. It was super hard for us to raise, not gonna lie about this. So our very first kind of like round of investment was actually angels. And then we said, okay, now we are going to launch the product. And we actually launched the product like a few days before the war started in Ukraine, which was absolutely crazy on personal, but also on business side, because I'm going into fundraising meetings. Everybody wishes that my family is safe. And then, I'm driving to the border to collect people from the borders to bring them to Germany. So it was like just insane time to even think about like how the whole launch went. And of course, when we launched, people kind of freaked out about the whole situation, about energy prices, what is going to happen. How can we kind of like support so we can cut off the Russian gas and all type of discussions. So as soon as we launched, our products were basically like sold out within a couple of weeks. So definitely, that gave it a bit of I would say, a push. But when we were raising, the VCs basically saw that, oh yeah, but the war will be over in like, I don't know, a couple of weeks, maybe months, and then nobody will need your product, right? So it's so new, like we don't know how it's actually gonna work out. Are people gonna use it? And I'm like, yeah, like electricity prices are gonna get more expensive. Like there's no going back. So why don't you think that a product that has already existed for a very long time, right? We're just basically creating a new use case of how to use it in households or like apartments. Why wouldn't that work? And even though we had the software part, we were seen as a hardware, basically a startup. And we went through, not to lie, 137 due diligences, to which every single one of them said no. And at the end of the day, we were kind of devastated because I was like, damn, like it's such a good product. People want it. We had wait lists of people basically pre-buying the product, and then we would be able to deliver only in like 6-7 months, but they were still waiting. And the numbers were just incredible. And I just couldn't understand what is it that, that they don't want to invest in. And at a certain point, we made the decision that, we're probably going to take on like a strategic investor that is going to move us forward, simply because we didn't see a way to actually raise from VCs. And I would say from anyone who is starting a startup, especially in the hardware business or in a very kind of like niche business, are VCs your investors, your perfect investors, right? Maybe they're not. So I think we lost a lot of time trying to pursue VCs when we should have been talking to a different type of investor altogether. So I think that research, and if you see huge resistance towards investment into your company, then go somewhere else. Yeah, I would do that.
Yeah. But then you need the telephone number of those angels, right? How did you do that? It's easy to say just talk to someone else. There's too many people out there to be too
Yeah,
lucky.
I think from very early on in my career, like I understand that, network is everything, and network really gives you so many opportunities in terms of whether you're starting a new business or you closed something and you want to start something else. Your network always supports you, even if it's like a small portion of it, it's still quite a nice push. And thanks to my network and, and the entrepreneurs that I kind of met along the way, and investors that I met along the way, I was able to make these connections. And of course, like once you have kind of one that invests, then, it kind of like multiplies and they all introduce each other, to the startup that is making the next big thing, and it kind of goes like a snowball effect. But one of the biggest advices for any entrepreneur, even if you're not founding right now, like right this second, but maybe in a couple of years, is network as much as you can and basically grow your network in investments, in finance, in people that have their own companies. They're always going to help you on your journey. And I haven't had a founder that I reached out to that has refused some kind of advice for me. So usually founders are very, very open to this, and I have a lot of requests from others asking me certain questions and topics. And I recently just actually like posted on my LinkedIn, like, hey, I should probably make this a thing because, so many questions are coming through. So maybe I'll make it a bit more structured and can help more people. But usually founders are very open to, answering your questions. So networking is the biggest thing.
Excellent. I think I subscribe to that. I totally agree. Very good advice. So guys out there, network. Even if you don't need it today, maybe tomorrow. Yeah. Let's come to an end. It's been wonderful, Karolina. My standard last question is, what does it take to get solar to the next level? You've already described some of the innovations, but when you look at the bigger picture, on a global scale, where do you think what needs to be done to get solar to the next level?
Wow, I think there is still so much that needs to be done, right? Next level solar, I think, I think legislation, right, is one of the kind of like cornerstones that hit everyone. I think support from the government. And if we're not talking even about balcony solar, right, but even talking about like rooftop solar, I think this year has been extremely hard for the solar industry in general, simply because of the inflation, but also competition, but also end of subsidies, for example, for rooftop solar, right? Grid fees went up. So from like 3.2 cents per kilowatt hour, they went up to 6.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And obviously, these are all the barriers that kind of lower the demand of people and consumers that are willing to install solar. So I think like more governmental support and a more like outlined legislation is something that we really, really need to get to the next level, to make sure that we operate really like as a union and not as like separate silos that have kind of like their own thing happening in the country. And I think connected devices and devices that are designed and made in Europe, right? I think if I had the possibility in terms of like the cash flow and the investment, I would definitely base my manufacturing within European countries. But right now, it's not possible simply because of the funds that I'm not able to get, right? And the more support we will see into this industry, the more down the line, we're going to be better, right? In terms of energy, like we will, let's say, switch to renewable energy much faster, and we will be there much faster. And I think like in general, Europe is doing great strides to reduce CO2, right? And I think this year has been like a record year that renewable energy surpassed the amount of gas used, for example. Yeah, and this is incredible. But there's still so much to be done, and I think like this help for entrepreneurs makes a lot of sense, right? So I think the VAT reductions, for example, on solar devices was fantastic, and this definitely helps us. But when you don't manufacture in the country where you're at, and you're still, importing the devices from somewhere else, in our case, our manufacturing facility is in China, right? So even though we design everything here, but our manufacturing is in China, we still pay the VAT, let's say, on the entrance of the products, right? And this kind of, I think, draws a lot of companies into cash flow problems, simply because you have like this 3 months period that this cash is frozen and then you get it back, right? It's like, if the VAT is not there, why are we even doing this? Like, why can't we use this cash for something else, right? And I think nobody really talks about it, but I'm super like angry about this stuff. Because I know that I can put this cash to use for something else. And but this cash is basically frozen on my bank account, and it's just there to, you know, to bring products here. So things like that, you know, where legislation just doesn't make sense.
Plenty to do. Thanks a lot, Karolina. Thanks for sharing your insights as an entrepreneur and your views on the solar industry. I wish you all the best for your new baby, WeDoSolar. And of course, we all hope that there will be true peace for your home country, right? And for Europe and the whole world, right? Thanks a lot,
Absolutely.
Karolina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.